Hi everyone, it's August 23rd, 2012. This was a very interesting article. How to Wreck the Environment. 1968. Written by Professor McDonald, who was the Associate Director of the Institute of Geophysics and Planetary Physics at the University of California in Los Angeles. I'm just going to read a couple of highlights from the introduction, and then I'm going to focus on one particular issue in this article. I will link below if you're interested in reading about what was going on in 1968, but he goes into weather modification and the instabilities in the atmosphere and thunder and lightning and hurricanes and earthquake modification and ocean modification. But he writes, among future means of obtaining national objectives by force, one possibility hinges on man's ability to control and manipulate the environment. When achieved, this power over his environment will provide man with a new force capable of doing great and indiscriminate damage. Geophysical weapons may be part of each nation's armory, and McDonald argues that these weapons are peculiarly suited for covert or secret wars. In addition to their covert nature, a feature common to several modification schemes is their ability to affect the Earth as a whole. The effects of modification can be projected from one point on the Earth to any other point on the Earth. Because environmental modification may be a dominant feature of future world decades, there is concern that this incipient technology is in total conflict with many of the traditional geographical and political units and concepts. Political, legal, economic, and sociological consequences of deliberate environmental modification, even for peaceful purposes, will be of such complexity that perhaps all our present involvements in nuclear affairs will seem simple. Our understanding of basic environmental science and technology is primitive, but still more primitive are our notions of the proper political forms and procedures to deal with the consequences of modification. All experience shows that less significant technological changes than environmental control finally transform political and social relationships. Experience has shown that these transformations are not necessarily predictable, and that guesses we might make now, based on precedent, are likely to be quite wrong. Non-scientific and non-technological problems deserve consideration by serious students throughout the world if society is to live comfortably in a controlled environment. But this was frightening. It seems that the lightning that they're creating, the excitation of timed strokes, could enhance the efficiency with which energy is injected into an oscillation. Well, that apparently affects the electrical activity in the brain, which is concentrated at certain frequencies, some extremely slow, around 5 cycles per second, some very conspicuous, the so-called alpha rhythm, around 10 cycles per second. They've done experiments on flickering light to pull the brain's alpha rhythm into unnatural synchrony. The visual stimulation leads to electrical stimulation in the brain. They were also working on direct electrical driving of the brain, but with large field strengths of 1 or 2 volts per centimeter oscillating at the alpha rhythm, frequency, decidedly unpleasant sensations are noted by human subjects. The Brain Research Institute of the University of California was investigating the effect of weak oscillating fields on human behavior. Those experiments showed small but measurable degradation in performance when exposed to oscillating fields for periods of up to 15 minutes. This is the hard part. The field strengths in these experiments are still much stronger by a factor of 1,000 than the observed natural oscillations in the Earth ionosphere cavity. The intensity of the natural fluctuations could be increased substantially, and in principle could be maintained for a long time, as tropical thunderstorms are always available for manipulation. The proper geographical location of the source of lightning, coupled with accurately timed, artificially excited strokes, could lead to a pattern of oscillations that producing relatively high power levels over certain regions of the Earth and substantially lower levels over other regions. In this way, one could develop a system that would seriously impair brain performance in very large populations, in selected regions, over an extended period. I don't know, we've had a lot of thunderstorms and a lot of lightning, and strange lightning, and how do you even connect the dots on that with a whole lot of Americans with impaired brains? It'd be very, very hard to find evidence to prove. It certainly is something to think about. Modification of oceans. In the past 2 decades, methods have been devised for the prediction of surface waves and surface wind distribution. A warning system for the tsunamis produced by earthquakes has also been developed. Well, that's interesting. This article was in 1968. Clearly, they're not using them. Okay, so one instability offering potential as a future weapon system is that associated with tsunamis. These frequently originate from the slumping into the deep ocean of loosely consolidated sediments and rocks perched on the continental shelf. Movement of these sediments can trigger the release of vast quantities of gravitational energy, part of which is converted in the motion of the tsunami. A series of phased explosions, perhaps setting off natural earthquakes, would be a most effective way. I could even speculate on planning a guided tidal wave, where guidance is achieved by correctly shaping the source, which releases energy. And another way would be the release of thermal energy, perhaps through nuclear explosions along the base of an ice sheet, could initiate outward sliding of the ice sheet, which would then be sustained by gravitational energy. 1 megaton of energy is sufficient to melt about 100 million tons of ice. 100 megatons of energy would convert 0.1 centimeters of ice into a thin layer of water covering the entire Antarctic ice cap. Lesser amounts of energy, suitably placed, could undoubtedly initiate the outward flow of the ice. Greenland. What would be the consequences of such an operation? Massive tsunamis, tidal waves, which would completely wreck coastal regions, even in the northern hemisphere.